Are we here? I think we're here. Hi, everyone. It's Claire Moon. This is another office hour. Welcome. There is a chat over on the right-hand side of your screen. There's about a 20-second delay. So if you put a question in there, I'm going to be checking it. I did want to try something new today, though. If you are asking a question, if you want to either tag me, you can do @aligning_light. I think that'll do it. It'll probably pull up the rest of it. Or just do like question, like type the word question in front of your question. And that's going to help me kind of keep track of things. Otherwise, I mean, this has gotten to be like so much fun over the last year. And like, there's more people coming, like the chat actually gets kind of wild sometimes. So I'm having a hard time keeping track of it. So yeah, put the word question in there so I can try to get it, or just tag me, one of the two. Thanks for joining me tonight, everybody. If you have questions, put them in the chat. If you're coming to this later and you have a question, like if you're listening to the replay, you can feel free to ask it in the comments below, and I will try to get back and answer that at some point in the next week or two. I did get one question in from my delightful friend Kun. So we're going to try to answer something about Virgo being exalted, or sorry, Mercury being exalted in Virgo, as well as Saturn and the idea of Saturn being a feminine planet. So we'll try to untangle something about that, or I'll just speak my words on it. So with that, let's get this party started. We have the clock. And another thing I wanted to go over too today, last month, I started talking, I only covered one of them, but I started talking about really common gaps in foundational knowledge of more Hellenistic era astrology, and just covering the most common gaps that I do see. We all have gaps. They're all there all the time. We're constantly, like, that's the great thing about astrology, is that you can keep learning it forever for your whole life. And there's always little, voids of information to fill in. But I did have a couple more of those, and that includes how to handle empty houses and how to handle the floating midheaven and IC in whole sign houses. Last week, we had talked about the thema mundi, and that is actually going to be relevant today. So if you did miss that last month, and you don't know what the thema mundi is, you might want to hit pause, come back to it later, or go and look at it after this. I'm not going to explain it again, unfortunately, because it took me a hot minute, but we did that last month. So that's what's on the menu for today. Let's check in with everybody, see who's here. Hi, Bonnie. Welcome back. You said this would have been your mother, the astrologer. It would have been your mom's 90th birthday. Happy birthday, Bonnie's mom. Oh my gosh. Our astrologer who knows when their babies are born because they're an astrologer. I think that was where that came up. Hello, Clockson. Welcome. I'm so happy to see that you made it. You just started your astrology journey. That is so fluff and cool. Welcome. Yeah, so we're going to nerd. It's a lifelong sport. Astrology is a lifelong sport, just like tennis. I don't know. Hello, Amelia, or Amelie. Amelie is here. KHY. Oh, Con. Hey, that must be you, right? That's you. I see your little avatar. So that's who we got here. If you're joining late, that's cool. If you need to leave early, that's fantastic. I don't care. It's very casual. Welcome. So first things first, I'm going to try to field these questions. So the question came in. Let me read it. So we get the gist. So it was more a comment. It was like first time caller, long time listener, first time caller. Saturn is a feminine planet. So this can get real tricky, right? Because gender is a whole issue these days that people get really funky about. And when we're talking about the planets being gender, we have to understand that, like, there's thousands and thousands of years of all kinds of concepts from so many different cultures that are all imbued into Western astrology as we know it today. So, throughout the course of time, if we're looking at a planet and that planet has characteristics, different cultures throughout all of time have attributed different characteristics to planets. For instance, for a long time, Saturn was about like agriculture. A lot of people don't think about Saturn as agriculture these days. Now we think about Venus as like puppies and kittens and yum-yums and stuff. And a long time ago, Inanna, Ishtar, Venus was killing people in the name of justice. So we get a lot of different ideas going. I personally don't know a whole hell of a lot about the concepts of Saturn potentially being a feminine planet. I don't know. I mean, because when we usually think about the masculine planets, we're thinking about like Jupiter, Sun, Mars. Sometimes people throw Mercury in there. And, when we think of feminine, it's more like Moon, Venus. And of course, there's like a mismatch. There's not as many on one side as the other. Of course, it was all made in a patriarchy. None of this is surprising. But some people say that Saturn has more of a feminine thing. The one thing that comes up that is very concrete, and this is way out of my wheelhouse, and someone else might know much more about this, particularly T. Susan Chang, but I've heard her talk a lot about the tree of life in Kabbalah, which I don't know anything about, but there's this figure in there called Bina. And Bina is a feminine energy, as far as I know, and I'm probably talking about it wrong, so apologies. But Bina is associated with Saturn. Bina is feminine. So when we're thinking about from the viewpoint of like Kabbalah, and the tree of life, that is like the accepted thing there. Now, that's a different system, and that I don't understand, that's different than astrology. Western astrology, as we're practicing it here. But what I know is like when I look at Saturn, I see Saturn having a rulership of both, and this could be completely unrelated, but a diurnal masculine place, Aquarius, and a nocturnal feminine place, Capricorn. All of the planets, except for Mercury, because Mercury is always the exception, all of the other planets rule two places, a masculine diurnal, I shouldn't say place, sign, and a feminine nocturnal sign. So for me, like, there might be some utility, some system rule-based utility of describing certain planets as masculine. Thank you, Reverend Kai. Mother Bina, Binah. And thank you for that spelling, because in my head, I've been spelling it wrong this whole time. But yeah, so maybe there's some technical reason why we would consider certain planets masculine and certain planets feminine. In my mind, like, and this is where it's my own opinion and it's being conditioned by my own experiences and views, is that masculine and feminine are archetypes that are in everything. They're everywhere all the time in everybody. But then Mercury coming in being kind of the neutral one, if we look at the planetary joys. So let me actually, and this is where it's good if you know about the Thema Mundi. This might be a little over our head. We're going to get rid of everybody. It might be a little over your head here, so I apologize. But when we think about the planetary joys scheme, well, we're going to bring up Cancer rising, because Cancer rising is what the Thema Mundi was, but or actually it doesn't really matter. So fifth house, this is the joy of Venus, for instance. 12th house would be the joy of Saturn, so on and so forth. 9th house, the joy of the sun, et cetera, et cetera. Mercury finds their joy in the first house. And this is very interesting because they can go either above the horizon here or below. Whereas it's kind of interesting where like the nocturnal planets have their joys all below the horizon, and Moon, Venus, Mars are all joying below the horizon. Jupiter, Sun, Saturn are all having their joys above the horizon. And then here's Mercury being neutral, being able to go, they're in the first house, they can go above the horizon. They are the psychopomp. Even mythically, they were the one, Hermes was the one person that could go in the underworld and the upper world. We know that whatever planets Mercury is around, will flavor Mercury. Mercury is the tofu of the zodiac. That's what I call Mercury, because whatever sauces you put nearby it, it will soak them up and become like them. So if you've got a Mercury conjunct XYZ, that's what Mercury is going to be like. And then Mercury's phase relationship with the sun, let's get everybody back. Mercury's phase relationship with the sun will also tell us whether Mercury leans masculine or feminine, more diurnal or nocturnal. And so like in this chart, if the sun is rising, Mercury rose first. Mercury is a morning star right now. That means Mercury is going to be more diurnal. The other planets don't necessarily get affected as much as Mercury by that. So Mercury is truly neutral. Long story short with that, so then the second question was, if Mercury is so neutral, like, what does that have to do with, or how does that relate to Mercury's exaltation in Virgo? And to me, those are two separate things. So that's kind of why I was explaining that and there might be some relation, but Mercury being a neutral type of planet is kind of a separate set of issues than the exaltation scheme. But what is cute is that, like in the exaltation scheme, Mercury's kind of doing their own thing. They don't follow the same rules necessarily as the other planets as strongly. But isn't that so Mercury? That is so Mercury. Mercury's always the exception. It's always the one that is behaving with a different set of rules than the other planets. So that's thing one. Saturn, femininity, planetary gender. Oh, last thing too on planetary gender. This is a separate thing than sign gender. There are different signs of the zodiac that are differently gendered. There's planets that are differently gendered or whatever. Those are two separate things. But in general, when I'm thinking about gender in astrology, I'm not thinking about it in a political way so much as I am, and not saying that you were, or not saying that anybody is, but just to be clear, that's not how I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it much more in the terms of nocturnal. Like in one bucket, you've got these archetypes that go together of nocturnal, feminine, passive, responding to influences, versus diurnal, masculine, yang. Instead of nocturnal, feminine, yin, now we've got the yang or the yang, influencing things around it. So those are how I kind of use all of that information. Masculine being more externally active, externally focused, feminine being more internal or responding to the influence. And all of this is a diurnal, or it's a duality pair. All of this is a duality pair. And so philosophically, that's kind of one of the base little gears in this machine of philosophy that we're using here, is this binary of this duality pair of these feminine yin type of archetypes versus masculine yang. So that's how I'm thinking about it. Everybody's going to have different thoughts on this and views on this and all that stuff. I am but one opinion, and I'm sure there's so much nuance that people are going to have different opinions about with all that. But I do know that like certain lineages of astrology, it is really important to differentiate, because then those qualities have outcomes, whether or not it leans more diurnal, yang, whatever. And I use all these words interchangeably. So as you can see, which probably doesn't clarify anything if you're new to this. Okay. There's that. When it comes to exaltations. So let's talk about exaltations. And now I shouldn't have brought everybody back, because now I'm going to need a blank chart again. Just kidding. So short answer, we don't really know where the exaltations came from. We have some ideas, but essentially we think they came from the Mesopotamians. We think that, but we're not entirely sure. And I get all of this information from Chris Brennan's Hellenistic Astrology, the study of fate and fortune, and then Demetra George, of course, ancient astrology. That's where I'm getting all of this. The exaltation scheme, we're not sure, probably from the Mesopotamians. There are some underlying patterns that we see. We don't understand exactly why it is the way that it is, but we have found some consistency. There's some consistent underlying thing with it. And I'll show you what that is. And then we'll discuss Mercury being exalted in Virgo, which Mercury being exalted in Virgo is kind of a debated topic. The modern astrologers, just based on quality, like affinity, like, oh, Mercury just seems to kind of jive well with Aquarius. So they did that. And that's not necessarily wrong, because Rhetorius, this ancient, Rhetorius the Egyptian, I think he was from like the 6th century. No, maybe earlier, but around there. He did the same thing. He was talking about how, the quality of Jupiter really makes sense with the qualities of Cancer. Jupiter is exalted. It's in its high place. It's the guest of honor. An exalted planet is super well resourced in a sign, and it doesn't have any of the responsibility. So it gets all the yum-yums without having to do the dishes. But Jupiter is a life-giving, growthy type thing. So is Cancer. This is where souls enter, versus Mars being exalted in Capricorn, the Lord of darkness and death and the loss of life, and Mars, who is the taker of lives many times. If it fits, it sits. So there's all of that. There's that idea. There's also an underlying pattern that the diurnal planets, Saturn, Sun, and Jupiter, all exalt in places that are at a trine to the signs that they rule. So for instance, Jupiter is in a trine to its temple of Pisces. The Sun is exalted in a sign that is trine to Leo. And then who is left? Saturn is exalted in Libra, which is at a trine to Aquarius. So all of the diurnal planets, they end up being exalted in signs that are trine to their domicile. We know that the greater benefic Jupiter, who is of the nature of a trine, diurnal. All that's kind of fitting with the underlying thema mundi domicile rulership scheme as well, and sect doctrine and all that good stuff. Then we've got the nocturnal planets and their their exaltations. And they are in a sextile. So let's see here. Oh yeah. Moon sextile to Cancer, Venus sextile to Taurus, and Mars sextile to Scorpio. So sextile, nocturnal, Venus is of the nature of a sextile. Who's left? Mercury. And we just plot Mercury in Virgo, right? That makes sense. So why is Mercury in Virgo? And then we get another pattern that we see, in that all of these planets that are all up here in exaltation places, they all have a traditional aspect relationship with the thema mundi's ascendant. So no exaltation, not that one. All of these have a relationship with the ascendant. So that's one thought, is that, like, why aren't there planets exalted in Leo, in Gemini, in Aquarius? There's a few different reasons why. This is one. There was also some thoughts about certain planets, like the Sun, not wanting to share exaltation rulership. They don't want to share rulership with these places. The diurnal planets don't want to share rulership. That was an idea. And then if we think about also, like, okay, well, where are we going to put Mercury? Are we going to put Mercury here or here? Like, what places are left that no one is exalted in? And okay, we could make a case for Aquarius, I could see that, but it can't see the rising sign. None of these can see the rising sign. So already, okay, maybe we got Scorpio left and Virgo left. Virgo makes sense. Mercury shares a lot of affinity with Virgo. It rules Virgo. We know that. But it also is one of the few places left that isn't already an exaltation temple for somebody else, or an exaltation place. And it sees the rising sign. So, and then last little pattern too with the exaltations that we see is that all the diurnal planets are exalted at the angles. Oops, not you. Why can't I think? So all these angular exaltation places, those are all diurnal planets. And then we get the nocturnals that they're in decent places, but they're not these angular, masculine, externalizing, like the day planets fitting in those kinds of angular places that are also external. So there's an affinity on quality there as well. So there's a lot of patterns that we're sort of a handful of patterns that we see with the exaltation rulership scheme. We don't quite understand why it is what it is. Mercury is neutral, but that's a separate issue than why they might end up being in Virgo. And I think that's all I have to say on it. That took a long time and I'm very sorry. I didn't know. Let me check in with the chat and see what's going on. And then I'll get my chart back in order. Yeah, Mercury is totally the tofu planet. So Kun is saying they've been trying to make sense of the exaltations. Yeah, I mean, they do seem a little arbitrary. But I think once we at least see some of those, there's something coherent about it. There's some system that underlies it that does seem coherent. I don't think we just quite understand its origins yet. If you want to be even more confused, go look at the exaltation degrees, because we know even less about why the exaltation degrees are what they are. So I won't go there. Yeah, and stars and gamers brings up a great little reminder here too. So, how I was saying that, we have all these planets that are ruling over two signs, one nocturnal, one diurnal. Mercury does that as well. They also rule two signs, a nocturnal and a diurnal one. Okay, so I feel like I didn't answer anything, and I feel like I didn't necessarily clarify anything, but I did explain a lot of stuff. So hopefully that is helpful. Does anybody have any other questions? Otherwise, hold on, let's get our planets back on the screen. Come back to us. Oh, and I did learn. I learned and I forgot, and then I learned again, as I'm always doing. The medieval Arabic folks are the ones that gave the nodes exaltation in Gemini and Sagittarius. I had completely forgotten about that. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that myself, but interesting. Okay. Oh man, Scorpio rising right now. Oh well, that's okay. And why am I saying, oh man? It's because Scorpio is ruled by Mars, and Mars is not happy right now. So the person in charge of this particular moment of time is not that happy. Okay, we astrology explained some stuff. Yeah, Reverend Kai makes a cute point too. Mars breaks the pattern of being the only nocturnal angular exaltation and the only one that makes a dexter or a right-handed aspect to the domicile. Yeah, so, it's like we think we have like a little coherent pattern of some sort, and then there's a little tweaky thing that doesn't really make sense, which is why this is tough for, let's take a moment of silence to thank like all of our scholar people, the scholars. I'm not one, but thank you, the scholars. All right. Let's talk about some gaps. Let's talk about what to do with empty houses. Or do I want to start with that one? Let me see what was on my list. No, let's do the floaty one. Okay. So in whole sign houses, we get the midheaven and we get the IC. And sometimes they can float over to the 11th house, the 9th house, or in the case of the IC, the 3rd house or the 5th. So I'll show you what that looks like. Maybe we can get it to happen here. Yes, we can. So here, a chart like this, if someone was born right now, they would have a Scorpio rising, of course, but then the midheaven would be in the 11th house. So what do we do with that? How do we interpret things like career and life path, praxis, our practice in life, our public life? How do we interpret that with the midheaven in the 11th? But then also we still have this 10th house. Like, what do I do with the 10th house? Because the 10th house is career, life path, praxis. Praxis is a Greek, I believe it's Greek word that just means practice, kind of like, what are you doing here? What's your major practice in this life? Whether or not you get paid for it, whether or not it's recognized, it's just, what do you do? What are you doing here? That can be anything. And then also in really extreme latitudes, you can see the midheaven in the 12th or in the 8th. One of the princes, I think it's Prince Harry, maybe Prince Harry and Prince William, they've got really extremely angled things because of the latitude in the UK. So what we do is we layer. Now let's pretend like I'm doing like a quadrant-based system for a second. Let's just put up Placidus. So no matter what in a quadrant-based system, whatever the start of because this is the midheaven here, if I'm doing like a quadrant-based system. And so that starts in Virgo. So then the 10th house here becomes Virgo. So in this chart, if I was looking at career and life path, the only thing I would really be looking at here is Virgo being the 10th, and then where Mercury is, and Mercury being in this quadrant 6th. That is where I would start if I was going to be looking for career. If I have whole sign houses, then that means now I have more information to deal with, actually, because I still have a 10th house that still describes career and life path. It's still Leo. It's still ruled by the sun, and the sun is in Taurus in the 7th. So that'll be a whole piece that I will have to delineate when it comes to career and life path. That's layer 1 or 2. It doesn't matter. A layer. The other layer then is Mercury, Virgo, 11th house. Mercury is in Taurus in the 7th here. There's things to say about that. There's things to say about the 11th house. There's things to say about Virgo. So, and then this being in a trine versus the sun being in a square. So there's a lot. Like, I could spend like an hour just talking about all that. But I just want to make sure that's how we do that. So then this person, not only is their life path going to have to do with Leo themes, archetypes, but it also might have to do with groups of friends. You know, they might have to network a lot. They might have to use group power in their pursuits, or perhaps groups will be really important in their pursuits. It could be organizations like the astrological organizations like NCGR or something like that. Your colleagues, any groups you associate with might be part of the career or life path. So for instance, I am part of the dance community because I am a dancer. That is one of my 11th house groups, are dancers. And my midheaven happens to be in the 11th, and I have taught dance, and I have done much I've done much praxis that has to do with this community that I am a part of. So that's really important. Also, hopes, dreams, and aspirations. That is a very important 11th house thing that we forget about a lot, is that the 11th, by primary motion, that's what's leading us up to the 10th. These are all the things we're chasing on our way to reaching our big pursuits in the 10th. So big hopes, dreams, aspirations, maybe that's the path. It's kind of Hallmark, it's kind of cheesy, but it's basically saying part of your praxis in life is maybe following your big dreams. It could be. Or maybe what you aspire toward is the path. Maybe I just aspire to be like the kindest motherfucker in the lands, and that's my path, and I don't get paid for it, but that's what I aspire toward, and it becomes the path. So it can be so many things, but it does open up more information to have to consider. That one feels a bit easier to me. Before I get into the IC, this one feels a little trickier to me. I'm going to go to the chat and see if anyone has any questions. Yeah, I know, like thinking about a midheaven in the 12th. And it's interesting too, because whichever one that is that has that, they do a bunch of philanthropy, like with like marginalized groups of people that are described by the 12th. So it makes a lot of sense. Hello, Atlas, welcome. Oh, we got some questions about the current nodal shifts. Yeah, that's a great question. We can talk about the nodes. We can talk about the eclipses. We are in an eclipse season. So that's a great topic. What's your question? Oh, what is your question? Yes, you can ask me a question. What is your question, Kun? Oh, we got a good example. Thanks, Taylor. So we were just talking about midheaven in the 11th. We've got someone here. Taylor says Scorpio rising with midheaven in the 11th, and they work as a construct graphic designer working with multiple creative recruitment organizations to get my clients. Oh, contract. Yeah, so a contract graphic designer working with like a group of people to get clients. So yeah, exactly. Like there's gonna be peopling involved, whether or not you like it, you know? Oh, thank you. See, we got such a good little group here. It feels good. It feels warm and fuzzy. Oh, if you're feeling the warms and fuzzies, hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the share, hit the whatever. I would appreciate that. And let's go to the IC. So then how would we interpret the IC? Because the IC, just like the midheaven, it's this really concentrated degree that describes the same thing as their angular house they're involved with, or that they are anyway, I can't word that right. So anyway, another way to say it. The significations of the 10th are the same as the significations of the midheaven. The significations of the 4th are the same as the significations of the Imam Chile, the IC, the midnight point, the subterraneous point. So they get imported, just like those 10th house topics got imported into the 11th. Now these 4th house topics of home, parents, dwelling, land, real estate, those are getting imported into the 5th. So what is that? So then we have to get creative. Just like we were trying to get creative melding the 10th and the 11th, we got to try to meld the 5th and the 4th. What would that be? Maybe wherever I live, maybe I want to be able to have really strong self-expression in that place. The 5th house is where I express myself. It is where I create. It's where I do my art. So for instance, I have my IC in my 5th house. And while I did take it down because of reasons, my pole, which is usually there, I have a big dancing pole. I want to be able to have my home be my art studio. I have like my dancing space, my yoga space, my little guitar in the corner. Like this is perfect. Like I just want to like have like a warehouse in the city there's a bed in the corner and the rest of it is just for room for activities, a place where maybe children activities, romantic activities, resting, rejuvenating. The home needs to be focused in on those 5th house things for maybe best effect, or maybe for better or for worse, outside of our control or doing. 5th house and 4th house things have been melded together in ways that can be favorable or unfavorable. So that's a thing. Let's pretend the IC is in the 3rd. So then we're melding 3rd house and 4th house topics. I see a lot with this one because the 3rd house is all of our extended relatives. It's like siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, all this stuff. They end up really getting merged into the family unit like that, into your home even. Like sometimes we have cousins living here and maybe I'm living with my cousin, or, the siblings live with me, or I live with my siblings, or maybe my siblings are my parents, usually the 4th house is parents. If we're getting a melding with the 3rd house, how common is it to have older siblings raising younger siblings, right? For better or for worse, that can be an IC in the 3rd. Having issues like coming together between family and origins and your home base and your 3rd house community. So sometimes I see this and it's people, really like the community matters just as much as the house they buy. Where they live matters just as much as what surrounds it. So having that in mind, that if you have the IC in the 3rd, it might be really important that you like your neighborhood, that you like your community in order to feel at home. What else? There's so many things. So just some examples. I feel like maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe it'll come back. But yeah, I see in the third. Oh, and this one, I'm going to steal this straight from Dr. Jen Zart. I heard her talking about this, and she used an example of the I see in the third, where people feel at home in their neighborhood local spaces. So for instance, if I go to a coffee house nearby, like I don't feel at home there. I feel weird. I'm like, who's listening to me? I want to be in a corner. There are some people who make themselves at home anywhere and they feel at home anywhere nearby. So they might go to the coffee house and feel totally at home, so that might be I see in the third. So we really do have to get creative, and that's a really good exercise. Try to meld those topics together and see what comes up. And as you talk to others, or if you're like looking at someone else's chart, get them talking about third house topics and fourth house topics, and they will tell you like how they are, coming together. Okay. So that's that floating angle. Interestingly, and now this is a little bit more advanced, but the solar return chart that I had this last year, it had the MC and the IC switched. My solar return chart midheaven was on my natal IC. The solar return IC was on my midheaven. And oddly, I was like, what in the heck is that going to be? Like my work and my home, my public and my private are getting flip-flopped. It's like, should I avoid scandals? Like, what is happening? What happened is I feel like my work and my home got flip-flopped. Like, I feel like when I'm at home, I'm at work. And when I'm away from my home, it's like I'm not at work. And it's because I've been working from home. And now my home just feels kind of like an office because I live in a studio and it's one box and I can't escape this place. So that's a whole thing. I was like, how's that going to turn out? That's how that turned out. Reverend Kai says, I've also heard the phrase is supported by for midheaven IC in another house. Example, the IC is supported by the fifth house. Absolutely. I can't agree more. So in this case, the IC, the home stuff, is supported by fifth house topics. So perhaps the children are somehow supporting your home, your creative pursuits, whatever those are, that might support a healthy home environment, that brings up, I love that wording so much because I think it implies something practical to know about connections between places. So if I'm connecting, say, what's a good example here? Like the 9th and the 7th, because Venus rules Taurus and the 7th. There's a connection between the 7th and the 9th. And so if I'm counseling someone on this, I make the assumption that the health and the wellness of one area of the chart then influences the health and wellness of this other area. So if there's a bunch of problems going on in the belief department, that's probably going to leak on to the relationships of this person. If there's a bunch of problems in the relationship, that's probably going to leak on to long distance travel plans. So when we have a connection between things, they affect each other. And so we need to take care of both places when they're connected to make sure that things are working well. Hopefully that makes sense. That's practically what I do with that information. Hi, Susie. Welcome. You made it. Sarah, Cancer rising, Pisces, blah, blah, blah. So sorry. Because like my brain can't carry information right now. I see what you're saying. Pisces on the midheaven in the 9th house with Jupiter, and Sarah can't not teach. Sarah always ends up teaching because she's got Pisces and Jupiter and 9th house stuff all mixed in with the midheaven. Yeah, that's a beautiful example. That's such a good example. Thank you so much for sharing it, Sarah. All right. Anything else? Let's see. Oh, Taylor says the 5th house rules grandparents. No, I put him in the 4th. That's a good question though. Let's look at it. Grandparents, they're your parents' parents. The fourth house is parents. The fourth house is origins. It's ancestors too. It is all of the base origins of everything for the chart. So parents, their grandparents, ancestors forever, fourth house. But then if we do derived houses where we pretend like the fourth house is the first, and then the second, the third, the fourth, my parents' grandparents, my parents' parents would be the fourth from the fourth. So seventh house actually could be grandparents. Derived houses, I would put the fifth house as like parents' money. Now I'm thinking. I've never done that exercise before. I'm like, what does that say about my parents' money? Let's see. So Sarah Rose Wait says, hi, Claire. Hello. Thank you. You're welcome. Do you work with Chiron? I do work with Chiron. How often do you track your own transits? Sometimes constantly, sometimes never. Do you see validity in progress charts? Absolutely. So those are all my short answers. Yeah, Chiron, I mean, I don't like him. I don't like Chiron. Chiron, I can't help but notice them though, and so I watch them. They're so slow though, like they don't move very fast. So they've been in Aries forever. But yeah, I mean, I notice their effects. Yep. And yeah, tracking my own transits. I mean, it really depends on what's going on. Like, I'll really hone in on certain parts. Like right now, I've been focusing a lot on watching my fourth house because it's in Taurus and there's just a ton of stuff going on there. I've got a lot of different things happening in my personal life right now that I'm like tracking very closely to a neurotic point that's not healthy. But there will be other times where it's like I haven't looked at what's going on in my eighth or what's aspecting to it or its ruler or anything. I haven't looked at that for like months, and I'll just like lose track of what's going on over yonder. And there are other times in my life where I just haven't watched at all, just because I'm literally too busy living my life to even check. Like I just have no idea what's going on. Yeah, and I mean, I didn't even find astrology until my late 20s. So most of my life I didn't have it. Yeah, and secondary progress charts are awesome. Like a slam dunk. Can't recommend them enough. So let's see here. What else? Does anyone else have any questions? We're doing really good. We've got about 15 minutes left. I made tea. I didn't even drink it. You're getting serious now when like I had one tea bag and then I like sort of finished it and then I just added like more water and like another tea bag. I feel like this is like old people stuff. I don't know. I just like remember like a grandparent or someone in my life just having like 4 tea bags, just going like by the end of the day, their cup was just like full of tea bags. That's so funny. Okay. So we've got some time then to talk about empty houses. Let's talk about empty houses, because that's another super common question I get that we can address. So let's take the 11th house of this made up person. And there's no one in there. So does that mean I'm not going to have any friends? Does that mean I don't have any hopes and dreams? Not at all. Of course we have friends. Of course we have hopes and dreams. And they're going to be Virgo flavored. They're going to come out and be expressed in more Virgoan type ways. So perhaps the organizations or the groups that we're a part of are really nerdy. Maybe they are like crafts people. They're people of their craft. Whatever that craft is, they have gotten into the nitty gritty of it and the details, and they are willing to do all manner of tedious things in order to reach perfection. That is your group of people. So like, let's say we are painting miniatures, those little miniature statues for tabletop role-playing games that the nerds are painting. I've done it once and it was awesome and it was super fun. It was very Virgo activity. That might be your friend group activity, It could also be that you're very specific about your hopes and dreams. It's not that I want to be a race car driver. It's that I want to be an F1 blah, blah, blah special person. You know, maybe you got very niche hopes and dreams. Perfectionism in all of that potentially, and having that be challenging. With great power of discernment comes great annoyance because I can discern it. That's where we start. So there's always something to describe based on the sign that is in that place. Then the second thing we do with an empty house is we find the Lord. This is Mercury's place in Virgo. So where is Mercury? They're over in the 7th. So now if I want to talk about 11th house hopes, dreams, aspirations, friend groups, allies, something about them is described by the 7th house and by Mercury in Taurus. Maybe I find friends through my partner. Maybe I find a partner via my friends. You know, like we started in the friend group. I met them in NCGR, you know, like I met them in this place. And tying those two things together. Maybe that person from the 11th house, maybe that friend ends up being a really important, like platonic best friend. And maybe you're making cute little miniatures together. This is super artsy fartsy, right? Because you got Taurus. So that's just an example. That's how that goes. That's what you do with that. So we could do it again too. We've got the 2nd house here. That's empty, Sagittarius. We can follow Jupiter. So the 2nd house, money, it's a double-bodied place, a mutable sign. So that's a more than oneness. So we know there's going to be maybe more than one revenue stream, more than one way of making money. Maybe this person has more than one talent that they can sell for money. Maybe they have values that are really belief-based. Like what they value is totally determined by what they believe and their worldview and beliefs, with Sagittarius being beliefy. And then something about the way they make money maybe has to do with 6th house stuff or Jupiter and Aries stuff. So we just get more information. It's kind of funny because when we look at an empty house, we're like, or empty sign, it seems like there's like less information, there's less to know, but the reality is that there's actually way more information to try to get in these situations, because then too, the ruler of, let's say this 8th house, Gemini, is ruled by Mercury, but that's not the final story because Mercury has to report to Venus. So there's always more to explore. Hopefully that just gives you an idea of that. So if you have an empty house, an empty sign, there's nothing wrong with you. It just means we have to look in a different place to figure out how that area of life is going to turn out. We got some other people who are just accumulating bags of tea. And I was just thinking about intercepted houses. Kun, you're psychic, get out of my head, because their question is, speaking of the empty houses, can we also talk about intercepted houses? This is something where I know like nothing. Can someone help me? Is there anyone in the chat? I'm going to do my phone a friend option, crowdsource. Anybody in the chat know about intercepted houses? That's a modern astrology thing. I do believe it's when a house ends up like in between, like it's like in between two other cusps. I don't think it's a good thing that they say. They don't seem to like it. So we'll see. Sorry about that. That's like, it's funny because every once in a while there'll be something that comes up where it's like, yeah, I totally can't even talk about it at all. So I apologize for that, but hopefully someone else can help us out. Taylor says they have a Virgo partner who loves painting miniatures. I love it. Well, because Virgo's tiny stuff too. Like I didn't even think about that till right now. Like I was thinking because like it's so detailed and small and like, but they're like super tiny, like just, yeah. Oh, Legos and labeling, also very cute Virgo things. Love it. No one knows about intercepted houses. So yeah, I guess I got nothing for you. I do need to expand my horizons a bit for these types of reasons. So I should at least have a reference for these things, like where we go to figure it out. All right, let's see. I think that was it for like actual topics. Let's talk about the nodes. Let's talk about the eclipses. Jessica Lanyado, thank you so much, Kathy. Kathy S. swoops in with the save. If you're wondering about intercepted houses, Jessica Lanyado, who I actually really like. They have the Ghost of a Podcast. It's Ghost of a Podcast is the name of her podcast. And she's got a lot of great episodes. I mean, I don't know which episodes, there's hundreds and hundreds of episodes, but I love when Jessica talks about like self-assertion and self-advocacy and like how to assert boundaries. Like she's so good at that topic too. So if you're someone who has a hard time with boundaries, Jessica Lanyado is a good source for that too. Interception. Sarah says it's like an aversion. So that's, and an aversion is kind of a disconnected thing. It's like, it's hard to access, it's hard to resource, it's hard to get resources from it. Like, yeah. So, okay. So I'm learning things. Thank you. So intercepted signs are kind of like aversions, and Jessica Lanyado knows about them. Yeah, and Kathy S. Brings up a good clarification point too, that you're not going to see intercepted houses in whole sign frameworks. That's going to be more when we get into quadrant-based calculations. Yes, Jessica, our resident triple Capricorn person. Oh yeah, hiddenness, intercepted houses, secret hidden parts. Ooh, maybe to be expressed later in life. And sometimes things expressed later in life, like I think it's just because we need more time to figure out that Rubik's Cube, if you've got planets that are like in aversion to each other, of course, that means that, they can't talk to each other very easily. For instance, like Saturn and the moon right now, they are in aversion. It's like they speak different languages. They have nothing in common. Night, day, air, water, fixed, mutable. No habla español, basically. That doesn't mean that over time, the moon can't learn Spanish. That doesn't mean over time, Saturn and the moon can't learn how to communicate through some other means. So, maybe later in life, this person would figure out how Saturn and moon go together for them, or not. But that's my own running theory. Oh, we got another person, Meredith, helps us with the intercepted sign thing. Rebecca Jacobson says that they've heard intercepted houses compared to like locked rooms within a home. Wow, that sounds frustrating. I don't like that. Now I'm kind of wondering if I have some. Meredith Gall says interceptions basically mean the intercepted sign reports to the sign before. See, this is the technical information I'm looking for. The Lord makes the intercepted sign more tricky to access. It's also a big house, so transits spend longer in there. You're right. Yeah, intercepted signs in a quadrant-based system generally mean like it's giant. Let's see if I can just change. Ooh, alcabitious. Ooh. Yeah, this is so like, oh no, does that count? Yeah, I think this counts. I think Aquarius in this one is like an intercepted sign because this cusp is Capricorn and this one is Pisces. So then if I'm understanding Meredith correctly, this moon here granted now I'm mixing water and oil and I shouldn't have picked this because who's the ruler? If the ruler is the sign before, the ruler is the sign before. So then that's Jupiter. So I guess Jupiter then has something to do with this moon. I don't know. I think that's more information than I've ever had. So thank you so much for that. So clearly there's things to know. There are things to learn and specific rules about intercepted houses, not just that I can pretend like they're not there. Okay. Thank you so much, Meredith. I really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Kathy S. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. Let's talk about the nodes. Let's talk about that they're going to change places, and then we will wrap it up. Last call for any questions. So come July, we're going to have the nodes shifting axes. So they're going to be going from the Scorpio Taurus axes into the Libra Aries. And that starts on, I believe it's July 17th. And the nodes spend about 18 months in a sign, and they move in the opposite direction of all of the planets. So that's why they're going backwards in the zodiacal order and not forwards. That is normal. So the south node is less, the north node is more. So for the next 18 months, starting in July, we're doing more Aries. We're doing less Libra. So that looks like more assertion, less compromise, more self-advocacy, less compromise, less diplomacy, less charm, less niceties, fewer niceties, not giving a fuck. That's Aries. Doing things differently. Aries sometimes is just in the jungle with its machete, cutting its own path. It's doing its own thing. Libra wants belonging. Libra wants to be with the group and take care of the group and understand the group. So it's very, very different vibes, and it is going more in that Aries direction. So for the next 18 months, starting in July, I mean, if you're someone who has a harder time asserting for yourself, has a harder time advocating for yourself or others, the increased Aries energy, especially in that part of that person's chart. Like, so for this person in the third, maybe with their siblings or something, they might find it easier to be more assertive because of that increase in Aries focus. Versus people who are already spicy. If you are already spicy, if you don't have any problem at all telling people how it is, and you just are, unabashedly doing your thing, then this could just add more spice. And more spice is not necessarily bad, as long as we got other flavor profiles that are still present. So as long as it's not overtaking the whole dish, that's the metaphor I will stick with. Don't, and if people are being spicy to you, more Aries. We won't be maybe caring as much about our aesthetic, some of these aesthetic kind of concerns and what things look like, and the optics, the appearance, social optics, interpersonal optics. Who has time for it when the South Node is in Libra? Not me. So that's kind of what I predict. One interesting thing is we are going from the nocturnal, more internalized, quieter types of Mars-Venus energy, and we're moving into the diurnal, influencing, externalizing energy of Mars and Venus. So it's almost like, I really feel like these two axes are very, very connected. This is like kind of a two-part story. The first 18 months being more of these Mars and Venus themes. Me and the other, my desires and my motivations, my disgusts, my preferences, what I want, how I get it, how I act when I don't get what I want. Anger, aversion, resentment, betrayal, vulnerability, intimacy, belonging, interpersonal stuff, preference, values stuff. It's like the last 18 months, it's all kind of been percolating and embroiling in our, I don't know if that's the word, but definitely percolating. And when we go into the diurnal part of this Venus-Mars stuff, some of this Taurus Scorpio stuff is going to come out, basically, if that makes sense, in a much more direct, loud way. So I'm kind of excited, a little bit nervous. I'm excited to not have Scorpio eclipses anymore. We do have one left, because the one October 14th is Libra. Great new chapters, beginnings, endings in the Libra part of your chart. And then October 28th, then we have our very last Scorpio flavored eclipse. And that is going to be a culmination. Sorry, not the eclipse is in Taurus, but it involves Scorpio. It's in this axis. This is the last one that we have anything in Scorpio kind of touching on it. And that'll be a great culmination, a lot of focus in the Taurus part of our chart, but that's the last one that has to do with Scorpio there. So that's what I think about the nodes shifting. You had asked something about a nodal return. So nodal return, I mean, okay, then we got to look at, you know, what are the nodes? What do they mean? And that depends on who you're asking. So I was doing more of the ancient kind of, okay, south node less, north node more. I also consider the north node, I like to use the Jyotish Vedic traditions myth of the dragon Rahu and its disembodied tail Ketu. And Rahu is this kind of insatiable, bottomless pit of a stomach. It's totally frenzied, confused. Wherever the north node is in your chart, you got to figure that out. I don't know, like life just probably isn't going to feel as good if that place is a mess and frenzied and confused and distorted with Rahu. So we got to figure it out, you know, or we even just feel drawn. It's like there's a hunger, there's an insatiable hunger. So we get drawn toward the north node. So, I mean, roughly, it's one of the assignments of life, in my opinion. It's one of the things that, whether we want to or not, for better or for worse, favorable or unfavorable, we are going there. So we got to figure it out. And when you're having your nodal return, it feels like kind of a checkup on that process. It's like, hey, are you paying attention? Because it's just the north node brings focus to wherever it is. It's just bringing our attention to wherever that is. Whoops. So if that is in, let's say it's going to, your north node must be in Aries. So if the north node is going into Aries, it is just really pulling focus into there. And if that is where the focus is as well in your birth chart, then you definitely pay attention. Pay attention to how you're feeling while the node is doing its return. Pay attention to the themes that are happening in that house of in that area of your chart. That is probably, if it's not going well, like then it's like, yeah, Rahu is confusing. We got to figure this stuff out. If it's feeling really aligned and like it is feeling really good, then use that as positive reinforcement that, okay, we are kind of pointed in the right direction. This is very different versus like a nodal opposition. Like, let's pretend this is a person, and then they're having a transit where the north node is here. Oh my gosh, these are hard to draw. And the south node is here. Like, let's pretend like they're having a nodal opposition. It's the opposite. Then this would be like an 18-month temporary. Yes, I know we said we weren't going to totally focus on the south node in this lifetime, but for this 18 months, we are. So, the south node being what might feel more aligned, more natural. It's not as confused and distorted as Rahu, because Ketu, or the south node, it's more about letting go, releasing. It's about spiritual kind of immateriality. It's not of the material plane. So it's not grasping, and it's not doing any of those things. So it has this kind of spiritual clarity. And I don't know if that's where the sense of like alignment or whatever comes from. But the south node is something that maybe we're already good at. It's like a stable foundation. It's a jumping off point. So it's not like we don't do our south node at all. It's not like I would tell this hypothetical person that like, oh, you shouldn't have an identity, have less of an identity, only focus on the other. Like that would not be the thing, but it would be like, what can we, using the words of Samuel Reynolds. I love Samuel Reynolds' take on the nodes. He's got a NORWAC lecture. I should find it and link it below. But he talks about conserving or preserving what's really helpful or works with the south node, so that we have enough bandwidth, enough energy to figure out whatever confusing things Rahu is doing. So let's go back to this example where maybe we're having a nodal opposition. And for 18 months, even though normally we would just be kind of trying to conserve, preserve, prune, just keep it the bare minimum of what we need to succeed. But for 18 months during this nodal opposition, we actually would be maybe focusing more on the identity and more on the roles and the self and all of that, and kind of maybe revisiting this place that is a foundation, revisiting this place for 18 months that is a home, that is a leaping off point, and checking in and being like, yep, windows aren't leaking, I ran the car for 15 minutes, so the engine stays good if it hasn't been run for a while. And then we go on back into the big lifelong quest of going to the North Node. So back to the person with the nodal return, this is more of that, like, okay, this is where you're supposed to be headed. Check in. How's it going? How is it going on that journey? Have you figured it out? And the older you get, the easier it'll be. Okay, let's see if that did it. Hopefully that helps. And I know we're at time and I went over, so I don't care though. You're welcome, Bonnie. Thank you. Thanks for the nice feedback. Yeah, and Stars and Gamers brings up a really good point too, in that, like, what if you have planets in a place where the nodes are transiting over? And do that less and more thing. So for instance, for Stars and Gamers, they've got, what'd you say? You got your chart ruler in Aries. So more chart ruler, more of whatever that planet is doing, more focus on whatever that planet is doing, versus your planets, your sun, moon, some other stuff in Libra, maybe less of them. You might, even your vitality, you might feel tired when the South Node is going over your sun and your moon. Less what? Less sun and moon. Oh no, those are my luminaries. It went over my Mars. The South Node went over my Mars a while back, and I put down a battle. I realized a battle that I was battling in my life, and I put it down. I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. And I think when the South Node transits over something, that lessening, I think it's temporary. I think, or it can be, maybe sometimes it's not, maybe things go away for good, but I think sometimes the things come back when the South Node leaves. So yeah, less of whatever those planets are doing, for better or for worse. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. Thanks, Taylor. Thank you, Kathy S. Yes, no more Scorpio eclipses, please. No more situations. There's this meme of a kitten who's crying and wearing a princess outfit, and they're just like, no more situations. That's how I feel. Thank you, Reverend Kai. Thanks for coming on back. It's always nice to see familiar faces and handles. Hit the smash button, or smash the hit button, hit the smash button, smash the like and the subscribe buttons, especially if you like this. I think that's it. Do I have any announcements? I might have to move. I don't know. This is my Mercury retrograde. Where's my ceiling? My ceiling, it's kind of dried now a little bit, but it was flooding really bad and leaking. And I had a whole line of pots and pans on my ground trying to collect all of the water that was coming through the ceiling. So I mean, Uranus has been in my fourth. My living situation has not been stable since 2018. I don't expect it to be for another 2 years until it gets out of there. But we'll see. Beige Cave had a rupture. Beige Cave is falling apart. So that happened. My books are, for the first time ever, my books are getting full. That astrology podcast stuff was really helpful for that. I'm very thankful for that. It also, not only did it kind of make the bookings go out a little farther, so apologies, but also emails. I used to try to respond to emails within 48 to 72 hours. I'm lucky if I get back to somebody in 7 to 10 business days right now. So big apologies if you have sent me an email and I have been tardy as hell. I've been answering about 10 to 12 emails a day, and my brain doesn't work anymore. So patience, thank you for your patience. But I'm going to dig myself out of that hole, and I don't foresee anything else happening. I'm doing all the same stuff, just consults constantly, emails and research, and that's my whole life. So thank you again, everybody. If you do need tutoring, if you do need a consult, I have openings in June. I have lots of openings left in June. So I know May is kind of shot to hell, but June is pretty wide open still. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. I love you very much. And I will see you the next second